The gravity was wrong. Not dangerous wrong, just wrong enough. That my calves had been burning for 3 days and I had stopped thinking about it the way you stop noticing a sound. After it goes on long enough, my body had filed it under conditions of service and moved on. Day 6 aboard the Veiled Accord, I was doing pull-ups from a cold structural beam in cargo bay 4 with my full kit on and my rifle slung across my back. Because the Keth ship ran at 0.7 standard gravity and without the added weight, it felt less like training and more like jumping around a room. My hands were getting raw from the metal. I kept going. The door opened. Vessel speaker Orin stood in the frame. 7 FT of iridescent chitin, 4I. Clusters, a formal diplomatic collar that he only wore when he had come from somewhere official or wanted to remind you that he had come from somewhere official. He had walked 3 corridors past his own office to get to this cargo bay. He watched me do 6 more reps. He left without a single word. I dropped from the beam, rolled my shoulders and started again. My name is Dara McLean. The people I worked with called me Patch. I was officially classified as a liaison asset aboard the Veiled Accord, which was how the Galactic Assembly wrote human soldier in documents that would be read by species who found the direct phrasing uncomfortable. 3 weeks of communication between Earth's diplomatic bureau and the Assembly's contact office had produced that classification, and I had spent those 3 weeks doing exactly this. 8 days until Palace Station, I was supposed to stand beside Orin at a diplomatic conference, represent Earth's interest in trade corridor negotiations, and under no circumstances generate an incident report, a clean, simple assignment. Simple assignments left a lot of time for pull-ups. I ate MRE number 14 alone in the cargo bay. No one had told me to go anywhere else, and I had not asked. The crackers in Pack B were better than the ones in Pack A. I had no explanation for this and did not want one. A data pad appeared under the door. Not slid placed, there is a difference, and it is in the care of it. Someone had crouched down and set it there quietly, not wanting to make noise, not wanting to be present when I found it. I picked it up. Cath script on one side, human standard translation on the other. Xenosociology brief compiled by the Assembly's Contact Division, distributed to diplomatic staff before engagements with human personnel. I was the engagement, I could tell from the slightly nervous tone of the writing, the circular phrasing of someone describing a subject they did not fully understand and were not sure they wanted to. I read it while I ate. The document described certain human groups as having developed a practice of deliberate self-conditioning, controlled sleep deprivation, extended physical stress training, repeated scenario exposure in high-risk environments. The purpose, as the document framed it, was preparation. The goal was to recalibrate the body's threat response to redirect the instinct that in most species produced paralysis and retreat into something that could still function. It used the word conditioning with an underline and a footnote explaining that no equivalent practice had been identified in any other Assembly member species. It noted that humans who had undergone this process showed a measurably reduced physiological fear response during active threats, not absent changed fear, and these individuals appeared to operate as information rather than Alarmed, the document recommended that diplomatic staff maintain professional distance and avoid anything that might be interpreted as threatening. I set it on top of my kit. They had most of it right. The part they missed was the part that mattered. They had described the process accurately and understood the result. Completely wrong. The conditioning was not designed to reduce fear. It was not designed to make anyone braver or calmer or more at peace with being in danger. It was designed so that when the bad moment came, the person in the middle of it would not stop. That was the entire purpose. Keep moving, keep making decisions. Do not stop. The fear does not go away. It is still there every single time. You just stop letting it steer. A sound at the door. A deliberate scuff of chitin on metal floor, which I had worked out over 6 days of observation, was the cath equivalent of clearing your throat before you walk into someone's space. I had noticed this one before, younger than the rest of the crew, or he moved that way like someone still deciding where to look in a room, smaller than the others, which in cath terms still put him wider than a standard door frame. He wore a translator unit on a band at his neck. He moved carefully in the corridors of his own ship as if he was practicing something he had not yet fully learned. On day 2, I had asked his name. He had said Riel. Oren had apparently mentioned that exchange in a staff briefing, asking. Names had not been listed in my assigned liaison behaviors. I had not known there was such a list. He stood half in, half out of the door frame. You read the document, he said. His translator produced a flat, formal voice, like a news reader with nothing surprising to report. It was well written, I said. A pause. He was deciding something. I had seen that particular pause in enough places and enough faces to recognize it without needing to know what calculation was running behind it. The section on fear, he said. Is it accurate? I thought about that. Parts of it. His chitin made a soft sound, like dry paper shifting in a drawer. Vega Station, he said. I would like to ask what it was like. I had not talked about Vega Station in 11 months, not to the formal debrief team, not to the assigned counselor, not to the 2 people I had crossed paths with at the transit's hub on the way here, both of whom had also been at Vega Station and both of whom had said nothing about it, which was the correct and only acceptable response between people who understood. I held the cracker in my hand. Loud, I said, then quiet. He stood there 1 second, 3-6. He left. I finished the crackers and went back to the beam. The ship pushed through space at a velocity I still had no personal fear, for I knew I was far from home. I knew 8 days remained. I knew the gravity was wrong and my calves were going to complain about it for the rest of the trip. I also knew Rail had checked the corridor before coming to my door. He had timed it so no other crew members would pass. He had placed the data pad carefully and given me enough time to find it before he knocked. He was not just curious. Curious was manageable. This was something more specific. He was trying to understand something and had decided the only way to do it was to get close to the source and pay real attention. In my experience, that was either very smart or very risky. Usually both. After the lights went a night cycle and the ship settled into its low hum, I lay on my kit bag and did what I always did. When sleep was close, I inventoried not from anxiety just to confirm the world was still in order. 1 pack secured, 1 rifle cleared, 14. Empty MRE wrappers in the disposal unit. 1 cold structural beam overhead, 1 data pad on top of the pack telling me what the galaxy thought it knew about my kind. Everything accounted for. Almost. The thing not quite accounted for was the 2 words I had given real. They had come out without the filter I normally kept in place between the official version and the version underneath it. I had not planned to say anything at all. Loud then quiet. 12 people, my unit, 6 hours of a situation that got worse and then went past worse into something with no category, and then 1 person left in the quiet which had its own kind of sound. I closed my eyes. 8 days. I was very good at living 1 day at a time. That skill had taken me through a lot of places, and it would take me through this one. The ship moved, the night cycle hum filled the bay. I slept. The diversion came on day 7. I was mid-inventory when the ship's ambient tone changed, not an alarm shift, the kind that in my experience meant something had moved fast on someone's priority list. Riel was at my door 14 minutes later. He did not knock. Threshold 9, he said, a Keth colony. Station 40 minutes from our current position. Armed separatists have taken control. 340 civilians are aboard. The Assembly's nearest response fleet is 14 days out. I set the inventory sheet down. Orion wants to see me, I said. He has been standing outside this door for 6 minutes, Riel said. He asked me to come ahead. He thought it would be. He checked his translator, less confrontational. I picked up my kid. Tell him to come in. Orion entered with 3 senior staff members and a formal document, triply stamped, presented in both Keth script and Human Standard Translation, 7 pages. I read it in 4 minutes. It was a mission brief in diplomatic clothing. Strip away the formal language. And underneath it said, go in, recover the civilians, use what the situation requires, do not make this worse. 3 questions came immediately. How many hostiles? One of the staff answered, between 20 and 30 Vreth separatist units. Typically, entry points to the civilian area. Another staff member pulled up the station schematic. I studied it for 40 seconds. Lethal force authority or capture protocol. All 4 of them looked at each other. Lethal force if necessary, Orion said. Good copy. I slung my pack. Orion tilted forward slightly, the Keth version of a clearing throat. We have an assault team, he said. 8 warriors well trained by assembly. I will take one. A silence. Want. I looked across the room. I want. Rill. Longer silence. Rill is a communications officer. Staff member said. He moves quietly. He follows direction. Without needing to understand every reason behind it, he does not make noise. When the situation does not go the way he expected, I clip the last buckle. I do not need someone trained for open engagement. I need someone who knows when to stay still. Oren looked past the group at Rill, standing in the corridor with his data pad. Your choice, Oren said, and I realized he was speaking to Rill and not to me. Rill set the data pad on a shelf in the corridor. I am going, he said. We were on a shuttle in 11 minutes. The station was dark at the secondary maintenance port which was exactly what I needed. Dark stations favor whoever knows where they are going, and I had spent the shuttle ride with the schematic open in front of me until the corridors and junctions were as familiar as a floor plan I had grown up in. I gave Riel 3 rules before we left. The shuttle: move when I move, stop when I stop. If I am down and unable to give direction, go back to the shuttle and return to the Veiled Accord. Do not come back for me. He repeated all 3 back correctly, without paraphrasing. We went in. The maintenance tunnels ran beneath the residential levels in a grid built for utility, not navigation. Low ceilings, cool surfaces, air that tasted like recycled oxygen, and something mechanical I could not name. I moved through it on the specific kind of focus that years of this kind of work had made available on demand, the state where everything that is not the current problem falls away, and only the geometry remains: angles, distances, timing. We found the first 2 hostels in the junction corridor between the maintenance level and the lower residential sector. I will not describe what happened there, except to say it was quiet, and it was fast, and Riel did exactly what I had told him, which was stay behind me and stay still. When it was over, he looked at what I had done. Then he looked at me. Then he looked at the corridor ahead. That was exactly the right sequence. I did not say so, but I registered it. The civilian holding area was in the main gathering hall, accessible from 3 directions. The separatists had covered 2. The third was through the service access, behind the atmospheric processing units, a gap between 2 large machines that generated enough ambient noise to cover an approach. Riel looked at the gap. I looked at him. You will fit, I said. He tilted his head in the way that meant skeptical but not refusing. We both fit. What happened in the main hall was fast and deliberate. I moved through it in the particular focus state where every decision arrives before the moment that requires it, where the work feels afterward like it was done slowly, even though it was not. Riel stayed to my left and back, position I had placed him in, and he kept the civilians calm and still, using a quiet authority I had not expected from him and was entirely grateful for. When it was over, I counted 340 civilians, all present, none injured, beyond what had already happened before we arrived. I let out a breath I had not known I was holding. Riel came to stand beside me. Is this, he started and then stopped. Is this what, I said. Is this what you always do? Is this what you are? I thought about the right, honest answer. Yes, I said. We loaded the civilians onto emergency transport in 3 groups over the next 90 minutes. Riel coordinated the transfers with an efficiency that told me he was genuinely good at his actual job when he was not spending mornings in cargo bay doorways, asking questions about fear. On the shuttle back, his left arm was held at a slight angle that was not how he usually held it. Your shoulder, I said. I am aware of it. When junction corridor. He had not made a sound, not once. I looked at him. You are learning, I said. He did not answer, but the tilt of his head toward the viewport, where the station was already a retreating point of light, told me he had heard it as what it was. We docked with the Veiled Accord 4 hours and 11 minutes after we had left. The formal debrief happened within the Oren his staff, a recording unit. I answered 11 questions in 11 sentences. Oren asked the 12th slowly, as if he had been deciding whether to include it. Were you afraid? I looked at him. Of what? He gestured at the footage his aide had already queued on a data pad. Of the numbers, the enclosed space, I was afraid of missing, I said. That is the only fear that is operational in a situation like that. Everything else is noise you have learned to quiet. Does the noise ever go fully quiet? No, I said, but you stop needing it. 2. After his staff left, Riel came and sat on the packing crate beside mine. He was quiet for a while. Then you were thinking about someone in the tunnel after the junction. You stopped for 4 seconds and you were counting. I saw your lips. I said nothing. He waited. Someone from my old unit, I said. Good instincts moved quietly, followed direction without ego. I looked at the cargo bay wall, reminded me of you for a moment. Where are they now? Vega Station. He understood. He did not say he was sorry, which was the right call. Sorry was a word for things that could have gone differently. We sat in the shuttle bay for 10 more minutes without speaking, and it was the most comfortable 10 minutes I had spent on that ship. The formal incident report from Threshold 9 reached the Galactic Assembly 72 hours after we returned to the Veiled Accord. I knew this because Riel told me. I knew Riel told me because he had started spending mornings in the cargo bay with his own food, sitting on the opposite packing crate, reading from his data pad while I worked. He did not knock anymore. I had stopped noticing when he arrived. The assembly has opened 3 separate inquiries, he said on the 4th morning after Threshold 9. 1 from the Han Collective, 1 from the Joint Species Ethics Committee, and 1 from the Vreth Consolidated Authority. What does the Han Collective want? I said from the beam. They want to know whether a human individual operating under a diplomatic classification has the right to engage in armed action under the Assembly's Weapons Designation Charter. They are arguing you should be classified as. He checked the screen. Category 3 Autonomous Threat. Implement. I dropped from the beam. What is Category 1? A held object, a blade. So they believe I sit somewhere between a knife and a spaceship. That is an accurate summary. I stretched my shoulders. The Ethics Committee. They want a full psychologic evaluation of your fitness for continued diplomatic engagement, given what they describe as. He scrolled the application of lethal measures without apparent distress, hesitation, or post-action behavioral change. I was eating crackers. That was specifically noted in the filing. The shuttle bay footage was included as a supporting document. I thought about that. And the Vreth. Riel set the data pad on the crate. The Vreth Consolidated Authority released a public statement clarifying that the separatist faction at Threshold 9 was not representative of standard Vreth tactical doctrine and should not be considered indicative of typical Vreth operational capacity. I looked at him. They were embarrassed, he said, by one person. I picked up my kit and began the morning check. Every buckle, every connection confirmed. My hands moved through the sequence without much direction from the rest of me, which left my mind free. What does Oren say? The vessel speaker. Oren submitted Formal commendation to the Assembly. Council on your behalf, which is currently generating its own separate controversy because several council members believe it sets a problematic precedent regarding the recognition of human-originated tactical action under diplomatic classification. He had submitted a commendation. I had not known he was going to do that. There is something else, Riel said. The Assembly's Contact Division has revised their existing xenosociology brief on humans. They have added a new category. He read it to me. Human Special Forces Operational Subgroup voluntarily self-modified through stress conditioning, sleep limitation, and repetitive trauma. Exposure, cognitive profile lateral. Problem solving under extreme duress. Threat assessment critical, engagement. Recommendation avoid. He put the data pad down. They got most of it right, I said. What did they get wrong? I thought about the honest answer. They think the goal of all that training is to produce someone capable of doing damage in a bad situation. I said, someone dangerous. Is that not what it produces? That is a side effect. I ate a cracker. The goal is to produce someone who does not stop. Capability is not the thing. Continuation is the thing. You keep going, keep deciding, keep working. The problem. You do not stop even when stopping would be the rational choice. Because stopping is the one option that guarantees nothing gets fixed. Riel was quiet for a long time. Vega Station, he said. The name placed in the air between us. Like something being returned. Vega Station, I said. I did not explain. He did not ask me to. That was the shape of it. 12 people who had not stopped until they could not go anymore, and one who had stopped only because there was nothing left to continue toward, and then had started again the next day and the day after, because that was the only thing left to do. Not bravery, not strength, not any of the things the Assembly documents kept reaching for. Just the only thing I knew. Oren came to the cargo bay that evening without his staff. He stood in the doorway for a moment before speaking. Before Threshold 9, he said. Before this assignment, I read the same document you found under your door. I looked at him. I thought I understood it, he said. I thought it was a document about capability, about what humans could do. It was not. He considered. I understand now that it was a document about something else. I do not have an exact word for it in Keth. The closest approximation would be the quality of moving through loss without being stopped by it. I held that for a moment. We have a word for it, I said. What is it? Duty, I said, but that is not quite right either. You keep going because the people who could not keep going trusted you to, because the mission does not end when the situation gets hard, because stopping carries its own weight, and most of us would rather carry the weight of continuing. I looked at the beam. We do not have one word for that. We have many that all point at the same thing. He was quiet for a long time. I am glad you are on the ship, he said. Good copy, vessel speaker. He left. I sat in the empty cargo bay and let the quiet do what quiet does. Outside in the ship's corridors, Oren was managing 3 simultaneous assembly inquiries, accommodation controversy, and the approaching conference at Pella Station. The galaxy was having its first serious conversation about what to do with humans who were not simply present on the frontier but useful in ways that made everyone uncomfortable. I was eating crackers in a cargo bay. Both of those things were equally true. Rillo came in shortly after and sat on his crate with his data pad. He did not read aloud this time, he just sat there in the half-lit cargo bay while I ran intervals down the corridor and back. And the ship moved toward Pella Station. And neither of us needed to say anything. That was a new development. I was not sure when it had become the normal arrangement. I noticed I did not mind. The convoy assignment came 2 days before we reached Pella Station. 3 vessels on a trade route through a sector called the Shattered Reach, which was a name that told you everything about its reputation and nothing about its geography. Fractured asteroid fields, minimal patrol coverage, 3 contested transit lanes that 3 different factions claimed and none of them adequately monitored. Ideal conditions for people who made their living by stopping other people's cargo. Oren briefed me directly, 2-hand cargo vessels and a Pellan registry freighter. Combined cargo value significant, route rated at moderate risk by the Assembly's Commercial Transit Bureau. How old is that rating? I asked. He checked, 14 months. Has anyone updated it? A pause, no. I looked at the route schematic. Moderate risk was probably accurate 14 months ago. The Shattered Reach has gotten more active since then. 3 different groups work it now, and they have a general agreement about not crossing each other's assigned lanes, which means individual lanes are more densely operated than they used to be. You have been studying the sector. Riel reads quickly and shares freely. Oren made the quiet sound I had come to understand as resigned acceptance. We departed with the convoy and were 12 hours into the transit when both gunships appeared off the port side of the nearest hand vessel, Pellan Registry. No transponders running in the Shattered Reach. Operating without a transponder was not ambiguous. The hand crew transmitted a distress signal and locked their bridge. I was already moving. The boarding tube was poorly pressurized, and the transit was uncomfortable. I moved through it in under 90 seconds, compensating for the gravity variance at the midpoint, and came through into the hand vessel's main access corridor with the station schematic already running in my head. 4 branching corridors, sound signatures placed 3 hostiles in the near corridor, 2 more deeper in, 1 near the bridge access. The math was straightforward, the geometry was workable. I will not detail the next 22 minutes. I will say it required the specific kind of focus where every decision arrives before the moment that calls for it, where the work feels calm even though calm is not quite the right word, where the body moves through a problem that the mind has already mapped, and the two stay in the same conversation all the way through. When I reached the bridge console and sent the all-clear on Keth standard frequency, 22 minutes and 40 seconds had elapsed. I sat down on the floor of the main corridor. The gear check, every buckle in sequence. My hands knew the order and went through it without instruction. 1 through 12, the same sequence I had run, in the same order in places that looked nothing like each other. At buckle 4 my hands slowed. At buckle 5 they stopped. I sat in the corridor and went somewhere not far, not long, the space between the action and the return, the gap that had no name and no function, but that I visited every single time, without exception. The last time I had been at buckle 5, Like this, I was in a transit vehicle, moving away from Vega Station in the dark 3 days after the event with nobody else in the vehicle and the schematic of the station still in my kit and 12 names written in the debrief notebook that I had not opened since Buckle 5 had taken me 11 minutes that time. I got through it in 4. I counted that as progress. Riel was in the doorway. He had come across on a second tube from the Veiled Accord without authorization, which I was certain had generated a conversation with Oren's staff, and which he had clearly had anyway. He stood in the corridor doorway and looked at me on the floor. He looked at my hands, which were at buckle 6 now, and moving. He said nothing for a while. Then you go somewhere when it is over. You go somewhere that is not here. I come back, I said. I know. He came and sat across the corridor from me, back against the opposite wall, not close, not far. How long does it take? Depends on how much there was to do. Larger operations take longer to come back from, not physically, just I looked. At buckle 7, there is more of it too. Set down. Is that what you do, set it down? Temporarily. He was quiet. Then he asked the question that cost him something. I could see it in the slight shift of the plates along his upper structure, the tail I had noticed weeks ago that he did not know he had. Are you all right? Not a status check, not operational language. He had learned that phrase from me. I had said it to him once when his shoulder was being treated, an offhand check. The kind of thing you say before you have thought about whether to. He had asked me 2 days later whether it was always used as a question or whether it could also be a statement. He was using it as both. I finished buckle 7, 8, 9. I am functional, I said. I am mission ready. That is not what I asked. I stopped at buckle 10. The corridor hum ran under everything. Somewhere forward, the hand bridge crew was opening their door for the first time in 23 minutes and discovering what was in their corridors. I reached into my kit and took out the last MRE I had, Pack B, the one I had been holding onto without a clear reason. I held it out to Riel. He looked at it, he looked at me. I said nothing, he said nothing. He took it. We sat in the recovered vessels corridor for 9 minutes without speaking. He ate the crackers from Pack B. I finished the gear check, buckle 10, 11, 12, and the world came back to its normal size, which was a manageable size, which was all I ever asked for. Better than Pack A, I said. He considered it seriously. The texture is different, I prefer it. Correct answer, I said. We went back across the tube. Oren was at the docking port. He looked at both of us for a moment, his eye clusters moving through several things I was getting better at reading. The convoy is secure, he said. Both gunships disabled. The hand crew reports no casualties. He paused. You were on the vessel for 22 minutes and 40 seconds. Yes. The hand captain is asking for your name. Tell him it is Patch. Oren tilted his head. Is that your name? It is the one that counts, I said. I went back to Cargo Bay 4 and started the gear check again from buckle 1. Old habit, you do not leave a sequence half finished. We arrived at Pella Station on day 14. The station was built into a refashioned asteroid the size of a small moon. Rings of docked vessels extended outward in a pattern that from the approach made the station look like it was made of ships. rather than housing them, 43 member species, 6,000 permanent residents, the place where Earth's formal engagement with the galaxy had been ratified 8 years ago. I noticed the docking bay smelled like engine coolant and industrial sealant, which was the same smell as every other docking bay I had ever been in, regardless of location or species. Operating it, I noticed the gravity here was much closer to standard, and my calves noticed immediately by suddenly not hurting. I noticed Orin's formal collar was on, and his staff was arrayed behind him in rank order, and there was a conference reception team waiting near the main arch, 4 species represented, all of them looking at me with the careful, neutral expression that I had come to understand was what the assembly wore when encountering humans they had heard about but not stood next to before. I stood straight, I looked professional. I did not do anything that would generate a report. There were 12 humans at Gate 7C. I saw them from 100 m out. You do not need a roster, you do not need insignia or formal identification. You know your own in a crowd the way you know an exit in an unfamiliar room. Something immediate and physical that does not require analysis. It is in how they stand, loose and ready. At the same time, in how their eyes are running the geometry of the space without making it obvious, in how they hold their coffee with the same hands that could, in under 3 seconds, address a problem. 3 of them had coffee, 1 was on a call, all of them had that look, the one the assembly kept trying to name in official documents and kept falling short of. I had not been near this many of my own kind in 14 months. Kal Torres saw me before I was fully through the docking arch, former ranger. From his posture, new beard missing the ring finger on his left hand, which had its own story, which I was not going to ask about because he was not going to ask about mine. He looked at the honor seal on the inside of my collar, the one Orin had given me on the final day of the voyage. Small Keth-worked metal, cold against the skin when I had first put it on. I had worn it every day since. Torres did not ask about it. I looked at the coffee in his hand. He held it out. I took it. It was, genuinely and unexpectedly, the best thing that had happened to me in 2 weeks. Patch, he said. Torres. That was the entire exchange, 4 seconds. Everything communicated. I had always loved that about my kind. Rill found me before I transferred to the new team's vessel. I was moving through the transit corridor between the diplomatic wing and the commercial docking sector, kid on at the pace of someone who has a direction and is not taking their time. He was moving at the pace of someone who had gone out of their way to intercept. Exactly that kind of person. He had about 20 m of corridor. I slowed. He came to stand in front of me. He had brought nothing, no data pad, no document, no official reason for being there. He looked at the honor seal on my collar. His hand came up. He touched it once. The tip of one finger, just the edge of the seal where it sat against the fabric. I knew this gesture. I had looked it up on the night I had started leaving the cargo bay door more than halfway open the night after. Threshold 9, when I had sat on the kit bag for a long time before sleeping and thought about what it meant to be useful to someone who was not your kind in a situation that neither of you had expected. In Kaith cultural notation, it meant I will carry the memory of this person. Not a passive thing, an active one, a choice being made and declared. I looked at him. He looked at me. I picked up his wrist, the one from the arm that had been in the sling, and held it for 1 second, the human version of what he had just done, which I knew he would understand because he had spent 2 weeks paying careful attention to things the briefing documents did not cover. Then I nodded once. I picked up my kid. I walked. Looking back was not something I had practice at. The new team's vessel was a converted survey ship, which meant narrow corridors, bunks bolted to the walls at angles that nobody had tested for sleep. A common area with a folding table and 4 chairs that 12 people used by agreeing that personal space was a concept and not a current reality. The coffee unit looked like it ran on hope. Someone had drawn on the wall map in 3 different colors of marker. Tors briefed us around the table. The mission was in a sector called the Vanthryx Passage. 3 assembly species had begun disputing transit rights there, which had turned the sector into exactly the kind of situation that diplomacy moved very slowly toward, while the people actually inside had a much more immediate problem. There was a working platform in the center of the contested zone. Approximately 200 residents, none of them were parties to the dispute, all of them were currently the leverage in it. The last supply vessel had turned back 40 hours ago when one of the disputing factions demonstrated they were willing to prevent platform access as a negotiating position. So they are holding the residents in place without technically holding them, said Kate Marsh across the table from me. Former Royal Marines, compact and precise with the particular quality of paying attention that made you feel like she was reading the fine print of everything you said. Technically, Tors said. We are not going technically, said Ben Harker from the corner, 1 sentence. He did not look up from the map. No, Tors said, we are not. I had been looking at the wall map since I sat down. The Vanthryx Passage had 2 constrained approach lanes and 1 open one. That read as a tactical liability until you thought about it from the other direction. I picked up a marker from the table. Everyone looked at me. I drew on the map. Entry here, I said. The constrained lane looks like the problem, but it also means they can only cover 1 approach at a time. You run a decoy element up the secondary lane, I drew it, and you come in through the primary with the supply vessel while their attention is split. Tors watched me draw. And if that does not hold, he said, then we do the other thing, I said. He looked at me for a moment. How long have you been thinking about this? He asked. Since I sat down. Owen Gale, who was the quietest person at the table and therefore had probably been in the worst situations, looked at the lines on the map. How long does the other thing take? Give me the platform schematics and I can tell you in an hour. Ben Harker looked up from the map for the first time. You are Patch, he said. Yes. Tors mentioned you. He looked back at the map. He said you were the most efficient person he had ever heard of. A pause. He said efficient the way you say it, when it is slightly concerning. I looked at Tors. Slightly, Tors confirmed. Nina Cross, sitting nearest the coffee unit, pushed a fresh cup across the table to me. The machine actually works, she said, despite appearances. Good to know, I said. I drew another line on the map. The platform schematics arrived 40 minutes later. I took them to the corner of the common area and sat with them for an hour while the others ran their own prep routines. Standard layout for a working platform, residential clustered. In the center, operational systems in the outer rings, maintenance access through the understructure in 4 places. I built the contingency plan the way always built them, starting from the worst possible moment and working outward from there. What do you do when the plan fails? What do you do when communications are out? What do you do when there are more of them than the intelligence suggests? What do you do when the one thing you planned around turns out not to be true? I had run through versions of those questions in a lot of different places. The answers were always slightly different in their specifics and always the same in their structure. You keep going, you make the next decision, the mission continues. Tors came back to the table around midnight ship time. He sat across from me and looked at the notes I had written in the margins of the schematic in a shorthand nobody else read. Sleep, he said. In a few hours. He looked at me. 14 days, I said, maybe 15, the Cath night cycle did not map exactly. He was quiet for a moment. Orn's commendation went into your official record, he said. The Assembly is paying attention. I know. The first one of those in 42 years, he said. I know. He leaned back in the chair. What do you think about that? I thought about the last 14 days, about a cold beam at wrong gravity and a data pad under a door that had almost understood something important about a dark station and counting heartbeats in a junction and a shoulder held at a wrong angle all the way back to the ship, about footage that 3 assembly committees were arguing about, informal language that kept not quite landing on the right words, about one finger touching one small seal in a transit corridor, about a gesture that meant, I will carry this. I think the galaxy will figure it out. Eventually, I said. Figure what out? That we are not what the documents say. We are, I looked at the schematic, we are not a threat assessment, we are not a classification. We are not the Threshold 9 footage or the Shattered Reach footage or whatever comes next. I put the marker down. We are people who had something to do and kept doing it. That is all. That is the complete thing. Tors held his cup. The galaxy is scared of us, he said. I know. That is useful sometimes. Situationally. You do not want them scared, he said. Not a question. I thought about about a packing crate and a shared MRI and 2 weeks of learning how to exist in the same room as someone who was not my kind and still have it mean something real. I want them to understand the difference, I said, between what we can do and what we are. Tors nodded once. He got up, refilled his coffee and put a second cup in front of me on his way back. Brief is at 600, he said. I will be there. He went to his bunk. I sat at the table alone with the schematic and the map and the cold coffee and the particular silence of a ship moving through a dark sector toward another situation that needed a specific kind of person to walk into it and not stop. I was that kind of person. 11 others on this ship were that kind of person. Somewhere back on the Veiled Accord, was learning to be a different kind of person, which was its own form of not Stopping, which was the thing none of the documents had managed to write down accurately. Oren was managing 3 assembly inquiries with a commendation he had filed without asking anyone's permission, sitting in the middle of the pile, generating controversy by insisting on accuracy. The galaxy was having its first real conversation about humans, not the frontier kind or the diplomatic kind or the dock worker at the flooded maintenance shaft kind. This kind, the kind the assembly called special forces in its documents and could not fully define and therefore filed under a void. Their problem to manage. I finished the coffee and carried the schematic to the narrow bunk and lay down with my rifle beside me and the plan already built in my head, and I was asleep in 4 minutes, which was a personal best for the last 3 months. In the morning, I would brief 11 people who had that look. In the morning, we would go to work. That was enough. That had always been enough.